Rating Center, and Mike Stoddard, the owner, will be here Friday to answer your questions on paint and wallpaper. Good morning to you. Welcome to the Art Lewis Show for a brand new week this Monday morning. It is the 12th day of May. Later on, after the 10 o'clock news, Cameron Massey from the Saginaw Bay Symphony Orchestra will be with us. Open phones at 11 o'clock this morning on Focus. But for this hour, we are going to spend time talking to Congresswoman Kristen McDonald-Rivet. Congresswoman, good morning.
Good morning, Art.
It's too early.
It's Monday.
It's Monday. Good.
Yeah.
I like that. That's very, very good. First of all, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it. I want to talk about a couple of different things. One that I'm involved in, as I mentioned to you earlier. You're very supportive of some police earmarks for this area, and I know you're going to have a press conference coming up. So tell us about them.
Well, first of all, it's Police Appreciation Week, which is a very cool thing. And anytime that we can raise up the people who spend their lives protecting all of us, it's great. But, every member of Congress is allowed to submit up to 15 priority projects that they want funded. And the majority of mine are public safety, because what we see is a lot of people don't really understand that equipment that our public safety officers need, our police, and is very expensive. So we've put in requests for a number of our local departments for things like bulletproof vests and signal flares and those everyday items that are generally outside the ability of their budgets to keep refreshed.
Yeah, I signed one of those letters for the signal flares for MSP.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for that. And is it safe to say, in the political world, that's a bad comment. Is it safe to say, though, that there's bipartisan support for those kinds of issues?
Well, I would certainly hope so. Again, this is one of the most partisan environments, I think, that we've seen in this country in a long, long time. But I don't. Who is going to be against bulletproof vests for our police officers? So I am very hopeful that these requests will make it all the way through the process and get funded. I know that in my conversations with particularly Democrats and Republicans in the Michigan delegation, there is pretty widespread support.
Is this part of the reconciliation process that's going on now, or is this the new budget for?
It's the new budget request.
Looking forward.
Yeah. Last year, the transition between the administrations, they zeroed out everybody's priorities. Nobody got any of them. And that is, these are not projects that you think about as we'll hear, these bridge to nowhere kind of port projects that everybody, these are things like local bridges and our police departments, our fire departments, and nothing got funded last year. So this year there is a lot of political wins behind making sure these projects get across the finish line. And so in my first year, we just immediately went, frankly, to public safety and local infrastructure.
You're a first-term Congresswoman. Any surprises when you got there?
Oh, my God. Yeah.
How did I know that?
So I fly into Washington on Mondays usually. This week I'm going on Tuesday, but I fly in beginning of the week, fly home the end of the week. I'm home every weekend, and it feels sometimes like it's 10,000 miles away. The Washington bubble is a very real thing. It's easy to lose touch with reality of how ordinary people are doing, and that surprised me. I knew that it was there, but when you're not spending most of your time in the district, I prioritize my time home mostly. I mean, I think it's part of my job, and I like my family. I want to be home as much as I can, right? But you really have to be able to be in touch with how things are landing and how people are doing. And we know that a lot of people just really are struggling, and it's easy to lose sight of that in Washington, and a lot of people really do.
Isn't it interesting that the reason you're there is to represent people of your district, and the first thing that happens when you get there is you're put in a bubble
Yep.
disconnecting from the people
Yeah.
you're representing.
You have to be very intentional. And we prioritize things like when you call my office, you will get a human being that answers, and you will
Nice.
get a response. Right? Email takes a wee bit longer. We get thousands, tens of thousands of emails, and we try to respond as quickly as we can. But you will always get a person that answers, and then I like to be in community when I'm home. And what I mean by that is, I'll show up at, not just the places where I'm invited to make a speech, but show up at the, local art fair or the community cleanup projects or those to really talk to people. I try to go to a different church every Sunday and worship in different places so that we just I'm staying connected and my team is staying connected to what's really going on in Mid-Michigan, which is the important thing.
All right, let's talk about a couple of things that have been in the news recently. Social Security office in Saginaw. Let's start with that. You got a commitment?
I got a commitment. I think I'm the only one in the country that got a commitment. So I'm pretty excited about
How
that.
did you do that?
I remember some members of my caucus are asking me the same thing. So let me just say this. My top policy priorities are protecting Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, because we had the majority of people in our district, the majority in Mid-Michigan, the majority of people are relying on one of those programs. And, basics like income support during retirement for Social Security, money that people put away and earned, and then health care that just feels obvious to me. So what we saw is in the middle of the DOGE cuts, Elon Musk put the Saginaw Social Security office on a list for closure. So we immediately wrote a letter. I mean, I know it sounds like a small thing, but sending a letter from a member of Congress to the administration is actually a pretty big event. So we wrote a letter, and we had a second one that was signed on by a number of people that said, this office is important. Tell me what your process is to learn to decide what's getting closed, why it's getting closed. It was particularly concerning because there are massive cuts at the Social Security office in general across the country, and they're also shutting down things like phone service. So when I talked with somebody, in particular, I did a teletown hall, and I had somebody call in that said, "Look, I'm on Social Security and I'm disabled, and I'm terrible at the computer." Right? So she needs the office. What we got was they took the list of all the proposed office cuts off the internet, and I got a very generic letter back. So I did where I think was what makes this country great, right? You go down, you go into Saginaw, talk with people, and start to raise individual voices. And so we did marches and we did a number of things, but then we held a press conference with a pretty good number of seniors right along with me, and just said, this isn't acceptable, and demanded answers. And the media, because we got a really good turnout, this is where the power of media really matters, called the White House and said, do you have a response? And they panicked a little bit, and essentially they put out a statement that said, we're not going to close this office. So I got a public commitment from the White House not to close the Saginaw office.
Amen.
Amen.
Doesn't happen often, does it?
It doesn't, but it just, people are cynical about politics, and I get that. They're cynical about the government. I get that too. But it actually is when individual people stand up and bring their voices together around something that's really, really important, it still works.
Let me talk about something important, because we had a listener call in this question, and I could have guaranteed this was going to be a question. Will you reach out to the governor to encourage her to hold a special election for the state 35th Senate District?
Yeah, I get that all the time. I have done that. This is, and I think it's important. We need to have representation in the Senate. It's 100% up to the governor. I have talked with her about it. She understands how important it is for the community.
She's afraid she's going to lose it.
I don't know.
I cannot think of any other reason
Probably
not to have it.
Yeah. I mean, yes, I do want to make sure that everybody listening knows, though, that the office is still staffed. So, It's not the same thing as having someone that puts a vote up, but if you are having issues with the state government, if you need some help, some constituent services kind of help, unemployment, issues with benefits, those sorts of things, you can still call the district office. And so I know there's a lot of pressure to get the election called, but I don't want that to have a message in the community that there's nobody providing services.
On the lighter side, I've heard some wonderful suggestions, like we withhold half our taxes because taxation without representation. So
I think that would probably get individual people in trouble with the Treasury. I wouldn't recommend that. I also will say it's frustrating. I understand how frustrating it is for people. It's not without precedent. John Engler used to, take long time. It's political. It's political gamesmanship. It's not. I can't. I have no ability to control it. But I have expressed to the governor how important it is.
Thank you. All right, we're going to take a break and be back. We're talking to Congresswoman Kristen McDonald-Rivet. We will return after these notes.
Sumo Sushi.
Hi, we're back with you here on the Art Lewis Show, talking to Congresswoman Kristen McDonald-Rivet. Before we get to some of the other issues that have been happening, including EVs and the California mandate, I just want to finish up with this note that we were talking about during the break. And I had mentioned to you that it seemed that the governor is very astute in at least being willing to sit down and talk to the president about issues important to Michigan.
Right.
What's your view?
That's her job. That's her job. I would too. Let me just say, she's come a couple of times to Washington to move forward projects that are incredibly important for Michigan. So FEMA funding for up north after those ice storms, being able to bring home projects for Selfridge Air Base. There is a very large potential project in Genesee County that will bring 10,000 jobs into the community. And they're all sitting on the president's desk asking, for him to sign off on them. She's going to Washington to try to bring those things home for Michigan. It's her job. And I said that immediately. I was the first member of the delegation to actually publicly put a statement out and thank the governor for working with the administration on behalf of our state. We're not elected to be advocates. We're elected to actually deliver for Michigan and move things forward. We don't, if our governor were just standing there and throwing bricks, right? That's not going to work out for anyone. That's just not even practical. So she does stand up. Right now there is a massive cut to Medicaid that is proposed in the House that the president supports, $880 billion out of Medicaid, where 46% of our births in Michigan are funded with Medicaid. This is just really important funding. She's standing up there. She's talking about how hard that will be on Michigan, but also she's working with the president when she can work with the president in order to get those things done. And I'm frankly proud of her for it.
So when it comes to Michigan, do you find solidarity across the aisle with those people who represent this state, for the most part? We have serious conversations about things that are important. We don't always agree, but there is a lot of just, frankly, friendship, and I have great conversations with Jack Bergman and Tom Barrett and Tim Walberg, and these are all Republicans in the delegation. And obviously the Democrats I talk to all the time, but we've got a project that's really, really important in Flint. It's called the Flint Registry, and it is a protective measure for the kids that were lead poisoned during the water crisis. I've been advocating hard for that, and it wasn't included in the budget recommendation, and have been talking with members of the entire delegation. We've got a number of Republicans who are signing on with Democrats saying, look, we have to stand by those kids in Flint. And so those things happen a lot.
And I think people believe that we sort of cross our arms and curse at each other, but that is far from the case. We're very Michigan. We like each other. We talk to one another. We generally all fly together back and forth to Washington. And when we can compromise, we do.
And one of the other issues you followed up on that Congressman Kildee was big on was PFAS.
Yeah.
And you're co-chair of a bipartisan committee.
I am, the PFAS task force. It is a pervasive problem that we don't really know a lot about, right? And, you know, I encountered the issue first when I was on the Bay City Commission and realized as we were looking at our fire stations that, you know, when our fire station needed to remodel, but it is so contaminated with PFAS that we can't really do anything with that anymore. And there's very little. So that is a couple of problems. One, the first and the most important is the way that it is very hazardous to our firefighters, but also we can't. It's very difficult to be able to rebuild and do any sort of work on our fire stations when there's so much contamination with not a lot of information about how to clean that up. So have really followed that when I was in the state Senate and now in Congress of how we come together and solve this problem that is we have, you know, PFAS in water, it's in our soil, it's and it's particularly dangerous for a firefighter. So we need some solutions, and it should be done in kind of a common sense, bipartisan way. So that's what the task force will work on.
All right. So let's get to EVs.
Yeah.
There is a California mandate, and the problem with California mandates is a lot of other states follow suit, and you literally crossed the line to vote to repeal it.
I did. You know, here's the thing. The government should not be in the business of telling you what kind of car you should buy. And I drive a Buick with a combustion engine. Most people here do. I started to get nervous about. So the mandate itself made me nervous. But if the first thing I did is went to my best friend Google, and really wanted to understand what is the cost of an EV pickup, because a lot of people, particularly our farmers, they're driving pickups, and they start around $70,000.
Yeah, they're expensive.
Yeah, that is more than most people in mid-Michigan make in a year. If I don't have any issue with someone going out and buying an EV, but we should not be in the business of telling them they have to. I think there may be a road where we are getting to the place where most people are driving EVs, but it will be the market that determines that, not the government. It was just, it was a very easy vote for me to take. Absolutely not on the mandate.
And that, because there are 11 other states that were going to follow suit
Yes.
in California.
They have, the equivalent of an MOU. They have all agreed to go together on these pieces. Listen, I think climate change is real, and we need to work on it with discipline and urgency. But this was not the way to do it, and it wasn't just people that are in love with a combustion engine that were kind of raising their voice, and then people, the really
we're called petrol heads.
Yes. Okay. All right. Okay. Yes. Who am I to brand people? But it's also the car companies that were saying, they're not selling. The cars are not selling.
Well, they've come to that realization.
Yes. And so, we were about to, a mandate would crash a business that has built our state.
Right. Take a break, and we will be back. We're talking to Congresswoman Kristen McDonald-Rivet. More ahead on the Art Lewis Show.
The blossoms around the tree, the
Take medicine like Ozempic and Zepbound. Many of them are overpaying by thousands of dollars a year. These GLP-1 medications for diabetes, weight... All
right, we're back with you in studio. With me is Congresswoman Kristen McDonald-Rivet. $12 million for public transportation in Flint. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so people need to get around.
Yep.
Let me just say that. One of the things I think we underestimate is some of those basic functions of government that we have gotten away from adequately funding. And whether we're talking about bus systems or in other places, in other parts of the country, these are trains and these are subways. But in our region, a lot of people just rely on the bus system in order to get around, and it needs to be functioning, needs to have schedules that work on time, needs to be safe means of transportation, and it has long been a priority, a little bit of a passion project for me. I would love to see us have a very robust, connected public transportation system across the entire region. Can you imagine if you could take a bus from Midland all the way down to Flint, or from you just can't do that anymore.
I have been preaching that I don't know how many decades with the multiple bus services around here. We don't have the ability to get on a bus in Midland and come to Saginaw. It can take you hours.
7. That's the number of hours it will take. We timed it out.
Yeah.
And that's if you make the exact right buses at the exact right time.
Right.
It's bizarre to me that Bay City, Midland, and Saginaw Township, that those are not connected. That it just feels, without knowing, if you don't know anything about transportation policy, transportation funding, any of that, it feels like, of course you should be able to do that. You can drive your car but we have put all these regulations in place. Funding mechanisms are like, the funding for it is completely screwed up, overly complex, really, really hard. All these barriers to it. But, Saginaw Valley, we've got Saginaw Valley. We've got all these jobs that are coming in with Hemlock and Corning. We've got SK Siltron. Let's figure out how we can all move around.
Well, Corning has announced an increase in the investment in Hemlock to $1.5 billion, and an increase in the number of employees to 1,500. Hemlock Semiconductor's looking for a couple hundred. Siltron's looking for a couple hundred.
Yep.
Where are we going to find them? Where are we going to house them?
Well, housing is a really... Let's put a pin in that just for a second. Where are we going to find them? We're going to find them right here in the region. We have plenty of people that can fill these roles and deserve to fill these roles. We just have to make sure, and there's all kinds of partnerships that are happening with Delta and even in our high schools, SVSU, that are creating the talent that we need to fill the jobs. I know that they're willing to actually train people up to do it. So that is really important. Housing, really hard. And, I would say the big problem in housing is that construction materials are so expensive that when we have people coming in to build housing, the cost is such that they have to build high-end housing, things that cost, $300,000-$400,000 to get in.
Those aren't high-end anymore, though.
Yeah.
If you're going to build a starter home, 1,500 square feet.
Yep.
At 300 a square plus, you can't do it for under $400,000.
No, you can't. And I know very few people, particularly young people, who can afford a $400,000 home. So there's dollars from the federal government to help with this. That a lot of money, $1 billion of federal dollars, come into Michigan to help with this. And there are programs that are intended to, sort of create the gap funding to say, okay, this is, if you built this, it'll cost you have to put it on up for $400,000. But what if you got a gap filler that allowed you to take a bit of a loss to sell that at a more affordable price? The problem is the federal government has put so much regulation and red tape and bureaucracy around those dollars that Michigan has an incredible housing director, and Amy Hovey is just amazing. But she is hamstrung. Her hands are tied when she tries to deploy put the money on the ground in a way that actually builds real homes. So, that is something that we have to tackle. We have to figure out how to stop these layers and layers and layers of requirements. And the same is true on the amount of red tape and bureaucracy that is about just getting clearance and permits, environmental permits, those sort of things to get these projects moving.
It comes under the heading, if you want the federal government to pay for it, be careful what you ask for.
Right. Shouldn't be that way.
but it is.
Yeah.
We'll take a break and be back with Congresswoman McDonald Rivet. Let me spend a moment talking about my car dealer, McDonald Ford in Freeland. Now, you've probably noticed it's getting harder and harder, and has been for a while, to find products made in America. And now with the uncertainty of tariffs, it's becoming even more important. McDonald Ford, in anticipation of tariffs, stocked their lot with tariff-free vehicles and have many more en route. Not only are they tariff-free, but right now Ford is offering employee pricing for everyone. That means you pay the same price as Ford employees do. In addition, Chrysler and import buyers considering a Ford also receive the lowest price offered. Chevy truck buyers can now look at the Ford F-150, also at employee pricing. So you see, now's the right time to visit McDonald Ford M47 in Freeland for the best selection and lowest possible price. Don't let tariffs prevent you from getting the vehicle of your choice at a price you can afford. Visit McDonald Ford in Freeland today. Remember, tariff-free and employee pricing for everyone. And Ford has announced that the employee pricing will continue now through July 6th. Stop out today.
Tired of worrying about your roof?
As a savvy business owner, you understand the importance of advertising even on a tight budget. That's why we've created a no-cost advertising solution.
We're back in studio. Congresswoman Kristen McDonald Rivet. We thank her for her time this morning, as always. Let's talk tariffs for a minute. We were just having this conversation. Let's carry it forward. It was announced today that apparently there is at least a 90-day agreement with China.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to work? All of these tariffs, and as I said earlier, President Trump likes to poke the bear.
He does.
See what happens and see what the reaction is. What do you think is going to happen?
Oh, that is a really big question. I can tell you that we know in Michigan the damage that unfair trade deals did to our auto industry, and so tariffs are a really important tool, but they're better used, in my opinion, when they're used strategically in very targeted ways. I think the approach of trying to get more goods made in this country is the exact right focus that we want the president to be thinking about. I worry because it's so erratic in the way that it is being rolled out. So it's across the board. Tariffs, the attack on Canada makes no sense to me. It's just no sense. China, yep, go ahead. If you can negotiate a better deal, that is good in a lot of ways. On again, off again. We'll see what the details of this 90-day agreement really look like. I think it's we know business wants predictability. They want to know what's coming. So I'm hearing from a lot of very large employers who are really, really struggling because of how chaotic the environment is.
Yeah, that's the word chaotic comes to forefront. For some reason, and I don't know what it is about Donald Trump, he seems to thrive in chaos.
I think that you're absolutely right.
And I don't understand.
When there is no chaos, he creates it, just so that there is this kind of whirlwind that follows him around.
He likes to poke the bear. And bear can be anything.
Yeah. What to me, Canada's a teddy bear. Stop poking Canada.
All right, let's. I want to turn to something that's been in the news. We touched on it earlier. Been a lot of problems at Newark International Airport, whatever they call it now. And it's pointed out the ills of aviation and the ills of the Federal Aviation Administration and old equipment, old facilities, lack of people. As someone on transportation, what can be done about it and what's going to be done about it?
Yeah, I serve on the Transportation Committee and really feel really lucky to be able to be on that committee. We're doing a lot of things. So you've heard me say this a million times. We have spent 3 decades ignoring all of our infrastructure needs. It's, this even builds on our public transportation conversation. Only looking, and then we have